Good morning, everyone. I am here to announce an event that will be held this Thursday, February the 28th, at the Bradfield, next Thursday, I'm sorry, February the 28th at the Bradfield Center. The name of the event is Athletes and Patriotism. It's a conversation about sports, race, and politics. The event will be held from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., and it is a joint event with the City of Lima and The Ohio State University. The event will feature a presentation by Ohio State professors Dr. Jessica Johnson and Dr. William Angel. It is free and open to all area athletes, their coaches, and their parents. If you have any questions about the event, you can call me at the City of Lima at 419-998-5596. Again, that'll be Thursday, February the 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Bradfield Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharetta. This was actually presented at campus. This is dialogue a couple weeks ago, and as we talked about it, we thought this really needed to be something that area athletes in particular had the opportunity to participate in. So we're reaching out to our schools to invite them, their coaches, and the athletes to be present. So should be a good event. The second item this morning is really kind of signified by the poster that's up here. This is the poster that the Midwest High-Speed Rail Association published this past year, and I have it hanging in my office. For some of you, you're aware that the City of Lima has been working for a number of years with communities along a corridor stretching from Columbus to Lima to Fort Wayne to Chicago to hopefully reestablish passenger rail. As we've been doing that, an additional opportunity has arisen. And that has been really pursued through the leadership of folks in Columbus, most specifically with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, affectionately known as MORPC. And we call ours the RPC here, but they go by a little more extended acronym. I want to, for a moment, recite some of the history of this work. A good portion of the leadership of moving the project forward for traditional high-speed rail has occurred through the leadership of the city of Fort Wayne. And we have partnered with the city of Fort Wayne for what is called a environmental impact statement, and contributed financially to that. And that work has been from essentially Lima to the west boundary of Indiana going into Chicago. The result has been a study conducted by an engineering firm which took a look at what are the required elements for federal transportation projects, and that has been largely completed and is now waiting on another phase of work. The City of Columbus has also been working with us, along with communities in Marysville and Union County and Kenton on a similar scope of work. We have been basically in holding both meetings and conference calls for probably 3 years, 5 years. All right, 5 years. Very exciting opportunity came up about in the fall of 2016, and I'm going to call up Dina Lopez to kind of tell us what that opportunity is, and then also talk about their announcement this morning for taking a next major step, actually the first in the nation, for taking the step to begin to develop the technical basis for these projects. So, Dina, why don't you come up? Dina Lopez is the senior planner, principal planner for MORPC, and it's good to have you here. They drove up this morning to join us in this announcement.
Thank you, Mayor Berger. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dina Lopez, as Mayor Berger shared with you, and my role at MORPC is basically to work on freight-related projects as well as any special interest projects that come across, our desk. One of the things that MORPC and other Central Ohio stakeholders, along with Mayor Berger and others along this corridor, have always tried to do is to kind of be ready for that next innovation and piece of technology that might be coming our way. It's been a long time since we saw a disruptive type of technology in transportation that changed our lives the way an airplane or the rail back in their day did. So this is kind of a similar exciting initiative. And for us, we're launching what we're referring to as the Rapid Speed Transportation Initiative. RSTI is its acronym. And what's significant about this is that we're looking at both the high-speed rail component along Chicago, Lima, Columbus, and Pittsburgh now, as well as Hyperloop technology. If you guys have heard about Hyperloop and Hyperloop 1, this is a mode of transportation that works in a vacuum-sealed type of tube, and it can transport people up to 750 miles an hour. So we're talking about approximately half an hour between Columbus and Chicago. We're talking about 20 minutes between Columbus and Pittsburgh. Lima would be less than 20 minutes away from Chicago through this mode. As you can imagine, this type of mode would be completely disruptive in the sense that it would completely change workforce mobility and how people can actually commute to work across this entire corridor. And we're also very excited about the potential for investment and economic development that would happen from something like that in combination with high-speed rail. What we're doing with the RSTI is basically to look at the corridor for both Hyperloop and passenger rail to create better connections between these three cities. We are working with Hyperloop, Virgin Hyperloop 1, which is a company that has great financial backing. They have the first test track in the world, and it is actually out in Nevada, which was visited earlier this year by our contingent. Mayor Berger, I believe you weren't able to join us on that one, but there will be another trip in which Lima will be involved. We cannot emphasize enough how important the city of Lima has been to these efforts. They've been champions of the passenger rail project, and they were very, very supportive and open-hearted and open-minded about future technologies and what it could mean to the Lima region. We are launching 2 special studies under this RSTI initiative. The first one is a feasibility study, which is for Hyperloop only, and basically this is a high-level technical look at economic development, economic impact analysis of the technology, the demand of it. What would it look like? How would it integrate with the rest of the system of transportation? And when I say transportation system, I mean all modes. I mean transit. I mean rail. I mean highways. So how would this integrate to all of that and create a much more robust and competitive system for the nation? There's been significant investment in the technology. They've continued to clear the milestones on the technology piece and the test track. We have RILD support from the City of Columbus, the Ohio Department of Transportation, Jobs Ohio, City of Lima, City of Fort Wayne. So everyone has kind of gone into this initiative with the hopes of advancing connections and improving just basically the transportation between these 3 cities. We are just launching 2 RFPs. As I said, it was the feasibility study for Hyperloop. And the second one, it's a Tier 1 environmental impact statement. And that is the importance and relevance of that is that for any surface transportation project that gets built, it has to go through a federal process. And that first step in that process is a Tier 1 environmental impact statement. We are launching the first one in the nation that actually incorporates both high-speed rail and Hyperloop to take a look at how we can implement both. And we are also going to be lining up the funding in the conversations already in place for that second push, which is the phase 2, which will complete that Tier 1 EIS. And in the meantime, we're talking with federal agencies and other states in the nation that are proposing Hyperloop technologies and Hyperloop corridors to start conversations around the regulatory framework and how this would unfold in terms of a future system development in the nation. I believe that that's all. I think I've kind of hit all the highlights. Does anybody have any questions?
Let me give you a little bit of the timetable of what's occurred thus far. Essentially, in the fall of 2016, MORPC took the lead and filed. There was an invitation issued by Hyperloop One, a global invitation actually, for developers of various sorts to propose Hyperloop. To propose Hyperloop routes, and MORPC took the lead on actually pulling that together for what is a route that has no comparable highway or interstate. You go from Pittsburgh to Columbus to Lima to Chicago. We've got 2-lane highways. We've got some 4-lane segments, but essentially there's no duplication of this route for either high-speed passenger rail or for Hyperloop. And so they took the lead to actually pull together the proposal. There were, as I recall, a couple thousand.
Yeah, there was 2,600 proposals submitted worldwide.
2,600 worldwide, and Columbus made the first cut. And that first cut, which took it, I believe, to 25, and there were around 11 in the United States. It was at that time that I was invited to also participate in some of the discussions and meetings, and there was an opportunity actually for the projects in the United States to make presentations in Washington in, I think, April of 17. And so I joined that set of meetings and actually got to hear what this technology is like. And we're going to take a minute and describe it because I think it's important for folks to not think of this as a train. It's really important to think of it more along the lines of a packet that's kind of ripping through this pneumatic tube. Then after that set of presentations that took place in April, Columbus again made the next cut and was then invited to Nevada to see the test track. And now actually is again pressing the envelope in terms of really juicing this process, making the decision, first of all, to begin to think about it in terms of what is the normal way that surface transportation projects are regulated and planned. And I think this is really a breakthrough insight that MORPC has developed here, which is not to consider it outside of that, but instead to look at it as a surface transportation system that requires the same kind of investigation that, say, a new interstate would require, or a rail project. Now, I'm going to turn to Dina because she's been very involved in this. And why don't you describe the technology? Because, as you said, there's been already some tweets this morning as this was released in Columbus that you may want to actually illustrate for folks.
Okay. There are plenty of really interesting videos, too, that you could look at online that kind of show some actual illustrations of how the technology works. But in short, it's just basically this came out of Elon Musk through a white paper. It was picked up by a whole bunch of different startup companies to try to see how actual applicable it was. The first models were created and were, shown to actually there is some that there actually it was applicable, and it was a matter of bringing it up to scale, and that's what led to a lot of investment. But in short, think about a vacuum sealed tube or a straw, and think about as you suck on that straw, basically the pressure that's created, you pull the liquid or you pull whatever it is that you have on there. It's a similar kind of system that uses basically a vacuum sealed tube to gain speed. And there's no friction. There's no, there's nothing there to limit its speed, so it can get pretty fast. Having said that, though, while the maximum speed is 750 miles an hour, the likelihood that we would reach that full speed for the full segments, with turns and things like that, there would be some leeway there in terms of like how long it would take. But imagine even if it was half an hour between Lima and Chicago, or an hour between Lima and Chicago, that is still incredibly disruptive in how we move our freight. And one of the things that I didn't emphasize earlier was this is very important to freight. Think about e-commerce. Think about the demand to have 24-hour delivery, if not same-day delivery. To be able to sustain that, we have to think innovatively. We're already looking at air drone development and how to do air drone deliveries. There's a lot of research being done in that. Hyperloop falls in that line of innovation, innovative thinking, and how to be able to keep up and maintain the demand that we're seeing as retail evolves and as passenger movements and behaviors also evolve with better technologies. Now, this vacuum seal tube could be at grade. And by grade, I mean it could be just parallel to a highway. It could be slightly elevated, or it could go underground. Where exactly and how it would be built would be dependent on the topography and physical conditions that we'll have to deal with. For instance, as we go through Ohio, the likelihood is that it'll be above ground. It'll be a tube that goes parallel to a highway or parallel to the rail line. If we're looking at Pittsburgh with its mountains and a lot of tunnels just for the highways, the likelihood is that we may have to explore some sort of underground or tunnel type of situation. So all of those things are going to be found out as we get through the engineering phases and engineering studies for this technology. But before we get to that phase, we got to start off with the environmental impact statement. So that is what is so exciting for us to share with you today, is the fact that this first step puts us in that route. And it's big enough. It's also very big for the passenger rail, as well, because this is basically completes work that Fort Wayne and Lima has been doing to look at the corridor and implement a service between Chicago and Lima. So now we're going from Lima to Columbus and extending it on to Pittsburgh to develop a better connection to the East Coast. Have I covered the technology well enough, or does anybody have any questions on how the technology works? The one important thing to note is about the movement and how it stops is not how we thought about it in terms of passenger rail or even planes. If you think about it, there has to be a full stop. Everybody comes down of that plane. If you've got a leeway, if you've got a connecting flight in Washington, D.C., everybody comes down that plane, and waits to get back up. For Hyperloop technologies, the way that the system is being developed is like almost like a highway system in a way, even though it's just the one, mode or the one shuttle coming and going. It's happening at such a rapid speeds, and it's part of a broader kind of computer system that is running it, that you get to have these kind of on-ramps and off-ramps. So if I get into a pod and I'm going to Lima and not to Chicago, I will be moved directly to Chicago without having to stop at Marysville or at Kenton. So it's a little bit different in that sense and how it works. And that's what it's gained by its speed, is that you're actually able to get more movements through that route versus having a passenger rail route that takes several hours of your day, and you can only get one or two, maybe three lines going every day. So that's kind of like the vision. And there's a very good videos through Virgin Hyperloop One's website too that you can see to kind of get a better understanding. But that pretty much kind of wraps up the technology piece and how it works.
What about safety concerns? You're talking 500, 600, 700 miles an hour. How are people going to be strapped into these things?
Well, that's one of the things that we know that our Virgin Hyperloop One and other, because the technology is being explored by many other companies, not just Virgin Hyperloop One. What's notable about Virgin Hyperloop One is the investment backing that they have behind them, and the fact that they've actually been able to build a test track already, and they're actually advancing all of that, all of their technology milestones. Of course, there's the acceleration, deceleration of the movement. That's why we will be starting with the freight before we go into passenger into passenger movements. I like to phrase it as, we need to make sure the eggs don't break before we put people in in this thing, right? So one of the things that they're looking at, the best way that because I had the same question, that it's been explained to me, is think about an airplane and how quickly we're moving up there. You don't know that you're moving 450, 500 miles an hour up there. The deceleration as it happens and you come down, the science, the engineers, our innovative human thinking has allowed us to be able to move at 500 miles an hour in the air and not experience the severity, the gravity, effects that happen to your body when you stop and go suddenly. So all of that is being worked out. That's part of what is being worked out. And this is why we know that we're not going to be able to reach the 750 miles an hour for the entire length of the corridor, because we know that it's going to have to account for acceleration and deceleration. But all of those safety concerns are being absolutely accounted for. Now, the one thing that we do foresee with this technology, because of its nature, because it's going to be pretty much computerized and it's going to be vacuum sealed, there'll be no interfaces physically while it's moving with any trucks or cars or planes or trains. It's going to be something that it's completely removed and separate. We foresee the safety component in terms of mass movements of people and goods to be all the more better. Like it'll be better because you won't have the type of incidents that we unfortunately see at this time on the roads through truck traffic and sometimes, unfortunately, airplane movements too. Does that answer your question? In terms of the technology itself? Well, Nathaniel, do you have any, this is Nathaniel Kalin, he's our program manager, and we kind of co-championed this project together from the beginning. So, yeah. Well, from the technology side, I would have to get back to you. I'd have to kind of consult with Virgin Hyperloop One as to what the status of that is. But from our side, we're not the engineers and the technologists here. We're the actual people that make it, like they're going to have it built or make it happen. And for us is that regulatory framework. That becomes, and I'm not going to say it's a problem. It's more of an area of opportunity. How do you incorporate this? And this is something that it's not just being faced with something like Hyperloop. We're seeing it with automation in vehicles movements. I mean, we've all heard about autonomous vehicles and the fears that that arise from people not driving their car and having it automated. So for us, is this the same thing? Like, how do you regulate that? How do you facilitate its construction and implementation, while at the same time making sure that you're taking care of the safety and greater good of the people that will be using it? And that's where federal regulation comes in. That's their primary role is to make sure that everything's built to environmental standards, to safety standards. So for us is, our challenge or our excitement is in figuring out, helping, being at the table with Mayor Berger and others in this region too, to help figure out how we're going to regulate and how we're going to implement and how this is going to be funded in the future. As you know, every road that gets constructed is going to need to be maintained and expanded and improved over time. So anytime you build it, we're thinking ahead of how we're going to finance it. Is the same thing with Hyperloop, and as such, we have to look at that regulatory framework.
It's, to be sure, we're talking air pressure, mostly driving the movement of the.
Yes, that and magnetic levitation and combination of magnetic levitation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You might talk about the costs of these studies that are.
Yes. So the whole initiative is starting off with a $2.5 million launch of the Rapid Speed Transportation Initiative. We have about half of those funds, committed now. We know that they're going to be provided. Now, we just started conversations with the Columbus Partnership, which is a private sector entity in Columbus, Ohio, that has the CEOs of all the major corporations in the city. They've also had interest in smart cities. So for us, partnering with them kind of lays down that beginning, that foundation for future private-public partnerships along with Hyperloop One. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
The city of Lima has been, I was able to raise about $80,000 from local companies, and that together with a direct contribution from the city of $5,000 will be going into the projects both for the portion of the work in Indiana as well as the portion of the work that's associated with this announcement today. Other questions?
Do we have any timeline after this? What's next?
Timetable?
So the timetable for the studies, the first launch of studies, the first study is going to be the feasibility study will take approximately 9 months. The second study, the Tier 1 environmental impact statement components, is going to take approximately 12 months. And the results of those two studies will be a preferred route, whether it's one route for both modes or whether it's separate routes. It'll inform that. And then it'll also basically give us an idea of what the service type, what kind of services we would get from Hyperloop One in terms of frequency of routes, capacity for each movement, things of such nature.